Hey there everyone, and welcome to my review of Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy. I'm going to be reviewing the PlayStation 4 version, which is basically the same thing as the PlayStation 2 version, but I feel that's going to be important later to make that distinction now. The reason I'm reviewing this game now is because it recently came out on the PlayStation 4. I guess it was recently re-released, I should say. Anyways, so yeah, that's the version I'm going to be reviewing. I recently platinumed it. You can check out my 16-part playthrough of how to platinum this game on my channel. Anyways, so in this review, I'm going to be reviewing this game off of 5 separate categories. The 5 categories are character, story, world, mechanics, and investment, with each category earning up to 1 star. So each category will be broken down into 4 separate categories itself. So for the character category, it will be broken down into design, voice acting and dialogue, growth, and interactions. With each one of those 4 subcategories earning a quarter star for every one I decide to give it. So basically, if I like one of those 4 aspects, I'll give it a quarter star, and however many quarter stars character has will determine will be added to the total of the stars at the end. So with story, the subcategories for story are beginning, middle, end, and help or hinder. Again, with each one of those subcategories earning up to a quarter star. For world, the subcategories are aesthetics, level layout, lore, and immersion. And once again, each one of those 4 subcategories can earn a quarter star. The mechanics category is going to be rated off of control scheme, control, cohesion with the narrative, and complexity. And investment will be broken down into replayability, dollar per hour, fun factor, and base game content. So I will be taking each of the quarter stars from each subcategory, and I'll be adding them together to give you my final star rating of this game. So the first category up for review is character. Again, character is broken down into the 4 subcategories of design, voice acting and dialogue, growth, and interactions. So we'll start with the design subcategory. With the design, the pros are each character looks different. Every character has an incredibly unique look. There's no 2 characters that I can personally think of that look exactly the same or anywhere really close to being the same. Jak, the main character, so the character we're supposed to care the most about, looks like an adventurer. He looks like the kind of guy that can go on the journey he's about to go on. The sages, they look believable. They are the sages of their colors, and so their skin is that color, and I'm assuming that that's because, like their connection with that color of eco. And to me, that makes sense, and they're all older looking, and they all look like, wise and whatnot. Then each character is memorable based on the way they look. Like if I was to say Kira, or Samos, or Gaul, or Maya, or even even like the fisherman from the Forbidden Jungle, like all of them have distinct, memorable looks. And their art style fit the style of the world. They're not like super realistic in a cartoony world, and or they're not like super cartoony in a realistic world or anything like that. They fit the world that they belong to, and it all just looks really smooth to me. So I will give a quarter star to design. Next up is voice acting / dialogue. There are many strong performances in the game with the voice acting. Kira is incredibly good at her voice acting, I feel.
Under control? Lurker armies continue to grow across the land. The sages have been kidnapped. Gaul and Maya have gathered enough eco to complete their terrible plan. And to stop them, you're going to have to fight your way through their citadel.
I also like Samos's voice acting.
Whoa! I don't think I'll ever get used to that teleporter tingling sensation. Hey! It looks like the Blue Sage threw a party.
Oh my! Rock Village is on fire!
One heck of a party.
They all show a great emotional range from when you can tell when they're being sarcastic, and you can tell when they're sad, and you can tell when they're angry, and you can tell when they're just indifferent based on just the way they sound, which I think is important for voice acting. There were also no cringe-worthy moments. I'm sorry, there were no cringe-worthy moments with the dialogue. There was no point when I was playing the game where I was just like, oh man, did he or she really just say or do that? And piggybacking off that, there are also no awkward lines. There's no awkward delivery. The voice acting is just really strong in my opinion, and the voices can provide very strong personalities for each of the characters. So because of all that, I will be giving a quarter star to voice acting and dialogue. The next subcategory is growth. Now with growth, I'm actually not going to give this a quarter star because I feel that nobody in the game really grows but Daxter. Jak doesn't really grow at all. He's the same silent protag from the beginning to end, but I think that's just something that happens with a lot of silent protags, so I guess I can't fault him too much. But the fact is, I don't really feel like he changes a whole lot. And none of the other core characters really change either. Samos doesn't really change at all. Kira doesn't change. The bad guys don't change. I feel like the only character that grows at all in this game is Daxter. So, yeah. Also, there are no repeating characters. And what I mean by that is once you talk to an NPC, unless it's a core character, like they're done for the game. So it's like there's no chance for them to grow because they are, they're all one-offs. And with Gaul and Maya, they're just evil for the sake of being evil. We don't get any backstory for them, so we don't really have any way to see them grow. They're just evil in the beginning, evil in the middle, and evil at the end. And also, no interaction furthers any relationships in the game. So what I mean by that is Jak and Daxter are best friends in the beginning, and they're best friends in the middle, and they're best friends at the end. And Kira and Jak have a crush on each other in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And Samos doesn't really like Daxter in the beginning, the middle, the end. There's just not a whole lot of instances where a relationship grows from the beginning of the game till the end of the game. And so because of that, I cannot give a quarter star to growth. The next subcategory is interactions. So with the character interactions, there is a ton of chemistry between the main characters. I really feel the connections and the relationships between Samos, Kira, Jak, and Daxter. I also feel Samos' connection to Gaul and Maya, which is actually kind of impressive considering we only see Gaul and Maya and the Green Sage Samos interact 2 or 3 times in the entire game. So good on them. The NPC conversations are also full of personality. That's part of what makes them so memorable.
You want them?
What Birdbrain here is trying to say is, we may have a few power cells laying around, and we might be willing to part with them for 90 orbs each.
Where have I heard that before? Hey, how do you two geniuses expect to get that big gem out of here anyway?
Well, smarty pants, we got 12 more years of digging to figure that out.
Gordy, wouldn't it take less time if you dug too?
However, the interaction formula always stays the same. You go, you engage a conversation with an NPC. They say that they want something, or they tell you about their problem. Daxter makes fun of them. They retort to Daxter, but you guys ultimately end up agreeing to help. Then you go and do whatever they want. Then you come back, they get a power cell. Daxter makes fun of them one more time, and that's it. The characters also do not interact with each other outside of cutscenes. So I guess we can just limit that to being a product of the time. But at the same time, there are instances for example, Kira and Samos standing in the blue or red sage's hut, and they just don't talk to each other. You can walk by them and they say random things about what they're seeing, but they're not talking to each other. And so because of that, I don't feel that there's ever any real interactions with characters outside of when you're either talking to them or a cutscene. And also, there's an incredibly underdeveloped villain/hero relationship in this game. Jak, Daxter, Gaul, and Maya have no chemistry or connection with each other whatsoever. And so none of their interactions really help grow or establish a relationship. So because of all these reasons, I cannot give my quarter star to interactions. Alright, so that's it for character. Just as a quick review, I gave a quarter star to design and voice acting, but I did not give a quarter star to growth or interactions. So the characters in Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy get a half-star rating from me. Alright, so we're done with character. Now it's time to move on to story. I've broken the story down into the beginning, the middle, the end, and I'm going to ask the question whether or not the story helps or hinders the overall experience of the game. So with the first category of beginning, I am going to give it my quarter star rating because it establishes an easy to understand beginning. So the first cutscene really does a lot to set up the game. It establishes the core character relationships within the first maybe 10, 20, 30 minutes of the game. There is also a clear introduction of the core characters. You see Jak and Daxter in the very beginning. We're not told that they're best friends. We just see the two of them messing around on the boat, and they end up going to Misty Island, so that gives us their connection. And then we hear Samos talking about how he's like a sage and how he has wisdom and stuff. And then we see Kira walk in. So it establishes the characters, who they are, and their relationship to each other pretty well. The beginning of the game also sets micro and macro goals. And what I mean by that is the beginning of the game sets a micro goal of getting 20 power cells to further the macro goal of changing Daxter back. You have to get 20 power cells to power the heat shield on the zoomer to make it across the fire cannon so you can go talk to Gaul and get Daxter changed back. So it sets both micro and macro goals, which I think is important, and it also sets the tone for the rest of the game. It sets up the first couple areas like the Sentinel Beach and Sandover Village. They set up the tone of this being a nice cheery adventure, while the Forbidden Jungle and the Misty Island also show that this game isn't playing around at times, and it can be kind of serious when it wants to be. So because of that, I give the beginning of the story a quarter star. Next up is the middle of the story. Now, as much as it pains me to say this, I cannot give it the quarter star because it has cool areas, yes, but ultimately they're really pointless. There's what's the point of actually going to the Precursor Basin or going to Bogey Swamp or going to the Lost Precursor City? They're cool to go to, like I said, but I mean, ultimately, in the grand scheme of the story, there's no real significance there outside of maybe the Zeppelin and Boggy Swamp. Also, there's no real character growth from anybody in the middle of the game. You just show up to Rock Village, like, oh, I need to continue to do what I did in the last part of the game and get power cells and fight the monster and move on. And that leads into me thinking that it repeats the beginning of the game. You go to a new hub, you talk to more NPCs that want things from you, and then you go to 3 areas, you clear them out, you get power cells, and then you move on. Also, I honestly don't care about Claw. They don't set him up as a big menacing villain, and I guess they kind of do with the warrior guy, but he's the only one who talks about him.
Hey, that's one of your vital organs. Walk it off, tough guy.
Oh, sure, I was tough once. Maybe even the toughest of them all. I single-handedly defended this village from those horrid creatures for almost a year. Then that horrible monster arrived and commenced the boulder bombardment. So, full of valor, armor shining in the sun, I climbed the hill to take him on. But he pounded me like one tenderizes a Yakao steak.
And there's just no development, there's no interactions there, so I just don't care about him. He's just some guy I need to get out of my way. And also, it barely adds anything to the game or the story. Always, the only thing the second part of the game adds to the story is that the sages or the blue sage is missing. They miss out on a lot of opportunities here to grow the story. It would be cool if we saw the blue sage fighting Golemaya or fighting the lurkers and getting captured. That would have added more tension, that would have added a lot of things, and it would have been also better if the other characters like the geologist or the gambler would have actually brought up the sage. So the fact that they missed out on those opportunities, and it doesn't really, the main whole crux of the second act of the game is just that it doesn't add anything to the overarching story. So because of that, I cannot give it a quarter star. And now we're on to the end of the story. I'm kind of on the fence about this because I don't think the end of the game is long enough. I felt that once you went through the lava tube, and the yellow sage should have his own lab and his own set of areas, just like the red and the blue sage did. But having the fact that, you know, the end of the lava tube takes you straight to Golemaya's Citadel just made me feel like they rushed the story of the end of the game. And the saving the world plot thread isn't fleshed out enough. You know, like you start off as this guy and trying to help his friend turn back to normal, and then all of a sudden Golemaya appear in the red sage's hut, and then you have no interactions between them for the Spider Cave or Snowy Mountain. But then all of a sudden, like in Golemaya's Citadel, it's like, oh my gosh, like you know, everything's still at you, and it just runs all the way into the end. And I think that if they would have had a yellow sage area with more cutscenes and stuff like that, they could have fleshed it out better. Or if they would have had more interactions, like I suggested earlier, with the blue sage getting captured, or seeing the blue sage getting captured, or seeing the blue sage fighting Golemaya, and then like having Golemaya leave right when no, you could still have Golemaya like have a conversation that they had in the red sage's lab, but then when they get to the yellow sage's lab, have them like oh man, we need to go. You know, so they could have added a lot of stuff there to flush it out better, but they didn't. But at the same time, even though it's not fleshed out, the end of the game does tie up all of the plot threads, and it does have a really satisfying ending. I liked it after you defeat the final boss, and then, you know, you have that experience with everybody on top of the Citadel, or the silo, and the final area I think is pretty cool. So because of that, I'm just it's close, but I'm going to give the end of the game a quarter star. So I had to think for quite a while about whether or not I think that the game's story helps or hinders your experience, or my experience with it, and I'm going to have to say that it actually kind of hinders it more than it helps, because things happen before you get places. So when you get to the blue sage's lab, and when you get to the red sage's lab, like the sage is already gone. You know, you show up a little bit too late, and all the action happens before you get to where it is that you're going. Also, nothing happens while you are there or after you leave. So every time you go to an area, you show up after the main storyline stuff has happened, and outside of talking to Golemaya like twice, or like, you know, the beginning of Act 2 when you see Kira and Samos talking about Claw, but like that's it. Nothing else happens when you're somewhere. You know, it's not like you went into the Precursor Basin, and then when you came back, like Claw like did something to Rock Village, or it's not like, you know, when you came back from the Spider Cave, like Golemaya did something devious and something happened. You know, nothing happens when you are places or after you leave. There's nothing in the game that there's no main storyline reason that makes you like go back to somewhere to try to like fix something, you know. So also, most areas do not they do not advance the main plot. You can't sit there and tell me that like going to Bogey Swamp like advanced the main story. Sure, the whole Zeppelin thing, but they still got the Precursor robot at the end anyways, you know. Or like going to Sentinel Beach, like nothing in Sentinel Beach advanced the main plot outside of you getting power cells. However, the base narrative is strong. The characters and the connections you form, or I formed, with the core characters was enough to make me want to help Daxter get better. And so just the base underlying like principles of what the game is, of what the story is strong. And so that's a plus. And also the beginning of the game motivates me to keep playing the game with its exposition and its setup. The middle of the game intrigues me because it's like, oh, well, what happened to the blue sage, and like where's this monster at? Like, how did he get here, you know? And the end of the game is satisfying, even though it's kind of rushed, and even though there are things missing in the middle, and the middle still intrigues me, and the end is still satisfying. However, because of how much is missing, and like the more I think about it, the more I realize the more they could have put into the story, and like cutscenes that could have happened. So I'm unfortunately I can't say that the story helped the experience. so it's not getting the point anymore. Alright, so if you add up all of my totals for the world, it gets my half-star rating. So at the end of character and story, Jak and Daxter is sitting at a total of 1 star out of 2. Alright, now since character and story are taken care of, it's time to move on to the third category, world. And the first subcategory in world is the aesthetics. So I'm going to give it my 1/4 star because it has a colorful and saturated palette. It's really nice to look at. I mean, just look at Sandover Village where the game starts. Or go to the Lost Precursor City. It's darker down there, but still, to me, looks absolutely beautiful. Or Snowy Mountain, or Spider Cave, just anywhere. I like the way and the feel of the way every area looks and the feel of every area in the game. And the entirety of the game, to me, was built off a unique art style that kind of sets it apart from other games of the time. And areas fit their themes well. So, Sentinel Beach, it looks like a beach and has beach-related things. And Snowy Mountain, it looks like a nice snowy Arctic place. And the lurkers, it looks like, they change color and they were wearing coats and stuff. Well, not necessarily coats, but, they look different than the regular lurkers. In Spider Cave, there's a whole crowd ton of spiders I get to deal with. So they did a lot of things well in order to make the areas fit their themes. And there's also, each area is also really diverse from the others. I mean, we have a beach, we have a jungle, we have a snowy mountain, we have a cave full of spiders, we have a volcanic crater. I mean, that stuff right there, an underwater city. That's just a lot of different areas. So I like the fact that they're diverse and nothing in any of the areas looks out of place. I think they did a really good job building the areas. So because of that, I'm going to give the aesthetics subcategory a 1/4 star. The next subcategory for world is level layout. So with the level layout, I feel that there is a consistent enemy placement in the levels, so you're never running around for too long, not encountering something, which makes the game feel more alive and more fun because you're constantly having to attack things, but it's not overwhelming by any means, except for maybe 2 areas. I also like the fact that a lot of the areas are interconnected with each other or with themselves, and what I mean by that is in a lot of areas when you go into the area, when you come out of the area, it loops around, So Misty Island is an example. You start at the dock and it forces you to go in one direction, and then by the time Misty Island ends and you get out to Zoomer after you deal with the lurkers, you go up the cliff and you're back at the beginning of the island, which is nice because it keeps you from having to run all the way back. And same thing goes for the Forbidden Jungle. You start and you can go in either left or straight ahead, and whichever way you go, it loops around. So that way you don't have to just do a whole bunch of needlessly backtracking. The levels also provide a bunch of diverse challenges. Anything from knocking lurkers off of their blimps with a zoomer, to fishing, to deactivating blockers in Snowy Mountain, to killing a whole bunch of spiders in Spider Cave. There's just a lot of different diverse challenges that the areas provide you, so that's another positive. Another positive I like a lot is the collectible placement, and what I mean by that is the precursor orbs. So one thing that I used when I was playing as a progress marker, since there aren't really any real checkpoints, was if I ran into an area and I saw precursor orbs, I knew I hadn't been there before because I gather all of my precursor orbs. And if I ran around an area and I didn't see any precursor orbs, you're like, okay, I've probably been here before, so then I try to find a new way. So I like the fact that the collectibles helped me determine where I was and where I needed to go next. And there's also a lot of different ways to get power cells. Some of them are just walking up into them, like the one on Sentinel Beach, or opening doors like in Forbidden Jungle, or fishing in Forbidden Jungle. There's just a lot of different activities that you can do in order to get power cells. So that's all nice. However, I said nothing but nice things about it, but I'm not going to give it the 1/4 star because the areas aren't connected to each other outside of the hub, and I don't like that. And the areas themselves also aren't complicated enough for me. if you look at it like Misty Island, Forbidden Jungle, even though I said it's nice that you can loop around, that's really like what they are, just giant loops. You know, there's not any real like shortcuts or hidden passages or hidden secrets or anything like especially hidden that you have to like look for or try to find. You know, everything that is quote unquote hidden is found pretty easily, and I just don't think the areas are complicated or hard enough to have me give my quarter star to it. I want to, but it's just those two things are really important to me. So because of that, I cannot give the level layout my quarter star. The third subcategory of world is lore. So for lore, I like the fact that the game provides you with various kinds of eco, and I like everything about the precursors and how they're mysterious, but like, you know, the remnants of them are everywhere, like the oracles, and the sage keeps talking about them, and the power cells and precursor orbs are like related to them, so that's kind of like mysterious. I also like the idea of the sages. However, the world history is not elaborated upon, like what the kinds of eco do to people besides Jak. You know, how like they're found, like sure there's eco events, but like where does the eco come from? You know, like how is it like filtered to becoming these different kinds of eco? How did they learn how to harness it? Like how does anything but blue eco like help daily life? You know, like, so there's just a lot of world history and stuff like that that's not elaborated upon, so I don't like that. So I guess this next couple sentences just sums up my point. There's a lot of cool ideas, like the eco and the precursors and the sages and all that, but a lot of it doesn't really have any real explanation or real end-game payoff. So because of that, I cannot give the lore my quarter star. The final subcategory for world is immersion. So I am going to give immersion my quarter star because I feel there's a ton of chemistry between the main characters. There are a lot of games I've played where I don't feel there's any chemistry between any of the characters, but I totally feel and I'm totally down with the bond between Samos, Kira, Jak and Daxter. Also, the NPC conversations are full of personality. They may only show up once in their one area, but when you do talk to them, like, they're very distinct and they're very memorable. No two conversations sound exactly alike. Sure, they follow the same formula, but the personality that the voice actors breathe into the characters and the dialogue make them sound different enough to me, so I like that a lot. There's also 16 areas to explore, and none of them share similar themes. So I guess you could say like Bogey Swamp and the Forbidden Jungle are kind of similar, but I guess that's like as close as it gets. But anyways, I just like the fact that they're diverse areas. The world is also beautiful to look at, so it's nice having the diverse areas looking as nice as they do. So that to me adds with the immersion. And the one gripe I have with the immersion, one thing that kind of like kicks me out of the immersion, is the fact that everything not related to the main story is basically irrelevant. That really sucks because there's no like ability to dive deeper into the world if you wanted to, because it's just not there, you know. But that's my one little gripe. But outside of that, I love the immersion of Jak and Daxter Precursor Legacy, so it gets my quarter star for immersion. Alright, so after going over the 4 subcategories of world, I have given it my rating of half a star out of 1 star. So if you add that together with the character and the story ratings, Jak and Daxter Precursor Legacy is currently 1.5 stars out of 3. The 4th main category in which I'm going to be rating this game off of is the mechanics. And the first subcategory of mechanics I'm going to be rating is the control scheme. I'm going to give the control scheme my quarter star because it feels natural. The controls make sense. You know, there's not a whole bunch of wasted buttons. For example, like, you know, you get one button for punch, one button for kick. You get a jump button, you get a look button, you get a roll button. You know, so like that just feels nice. It doesn't feel overly complicated. I never found myself wanting additional actions. Like, I never found myself wanting, like, man, I wish this particular like control or this particular mechanic was in the game so I could do this, which was really nice, because there's sometimes for example, in Jak 2 and Jak 3, which I'll get into when I review that game, or those games, is something that I was like, man, I really want to have this. And there's also a nice variety of combos. The control scheme is simple, but the number of ways in which you can combine the buttons together is really nice. For example, you can combine your crouch, or I guess your roll, because crouch and roll are the same button. You can combine that with jump, and you do a nice, you either do a super high vertical jump, or you do a roll, or you can combine punch and jump in either way. So you either punch and then do an uppercut, or you jump and you do a slam. So there's just a nice variety of combos that you can do in the game. And because of that, I'm going to give the mechanics my quarter star, or the control scheme of the mechanics my quarter star rating. Next is the handling subcategory of mechanics. I'm also going to give this my quarter star because the normal movement and actions are fluid. The snug controls make the game feel fair. There's a lot of platforming in this game and a lot of enemies to fight. However, every time I got hit and every time I fell to my death, I knew it was my fault. You know, I didn't really feel like I slid off of anything, or I didn't really feel like something should have happened and it didn't. So I love it when a game feels fair, and I love it when I feel like I have the control I feel I should have in a game, which definitely happens here. However, I hate the zoomer. Like, I really, really dislike the way the zoomer handles. It is way too loose. It doesn't turn fast enough. It's too slow. Like, it's just a giant clunky mess. However, I'm not going to let something that you ride 5 to 6 times in the entire game prevent me from giving this my quarter star. And so, like I said, the handling subcategory of mechanics gets my quarter star rating. The third subcategory of mechanics is how cohesive the mechanics are with the narrative. Now, this is going to be kind of a complicated subcategory to explain, but hopefully you guys can get what I mean by this as I go and talk about it. So, my first point about the cohesion with the narrative is that the core characters are a team, yet only Jak does stuff.
Oh, and it looks like the Blue Sage is working on a levitation machine to move them. Assuming it's operational, we're gonna need power cells to fuel it. I guess you two are going to have to find some more.
Sure, Kira transports things to you like the Fluffla and the Zoomer, but she doesn't help you out in the field, you know. And Samos, he doesn't do anything. He just sits around, flies, and yells at people, you know. So and Daxter, he doesn't do anything either. He just sits on Jak's shoulder the entire time. So I dislike the fact that they're presented as a team, and with the narrative, it's the 4 of them going on this journey together, yet Jak is the only one actively doing anything. Another thing I don't like is the fact that there's no progression or inclusion of new mechanics. You're supposed to be presented the whole thing of the game is going from just a guy who needs training to get out of the village, according to Samos.
Brave adventurer! You two couldn't find your way out of the village without training. Before you do anything else, you better go through the warp gate and get some practice on Geyser Rock.
And at the end of the game, has become a true hero, again according to Samos.
Boys, you're real heroes now.
But his moveset and everything he can do stays exactly the same throughout the entirety of the game. You know, he doesn't learn how to channel eco better. He doesn't learn new upgraded attacks for his moves. He doesn't do anything like that. You know, he just knows his basic stuff. He has his basic channeling of eco, and he just stays the same. So to me, it just feels weird that he's become this hero, yet he hasn't changed at all with what you can do with him. Also, in the whole context of the hero thing, outside of defeating the final boss, the only time you actually save something in the game is Rock Village from Claw. You know, every other area you go to, you don't save anybody from anything. So it just feels kind of underwhelming with the whole hero aspect when you only do 2 quote-unquote heroic things in the entire game. Also, the 95% of what you're doing in the game is collecting something. You're collecting scout flies, you're collecting power cells, and you're collecting precursor orbs. However, 64 of the 72 power cells you need to get past the lava tube don't involve collectibles, which means that you don't need to pick up the precursor orbs. You don't need to pick up the scout flies. You only need to pick up enough of either or to get 8 precursor or 8 power cells, which is 1/9 of the total precursor power cells that you need. You can get 14 power cells with scout flies by the time you get to the lava tube, and you can also get a crap ton of power cells through precursor orbs with crap ton of power cells with precursor orbs by the time you get to the lava tube, which means that you can just completely ignore precursor orbs in the game, or you can completely ignore scout flies. And since those are each one of the 3 big things you collect, you don't need to get having to get one of them in their entirety is a big problem with me. Another thing is, outside of powering the heat shield for the zoomers and powering the blue sage's eco beam thing, there's absolutely no point. There's no real point. There's no real purpose in getting power cells. So you can make it through the entire game without collecting one of the big 3 collectibles, and the other arguably most important of the 3 collectibles basically is just a plot device that's completely pointless if you think about it. It's just busy work, and I don't like that at all. Also, only the eco vents affect other areas in their own area in any significant way. Nothing else that you do in the game will affect another area outside of the eco beams, or the eco beam in Forbidden Jungle and the eco vents, which I just think is a huge problem. And because of all of these things, I cannot say that the gameplay and the mechanics of the game are cohesive with the narrative that the game is telling us. So therefore, it does not get my quarter star. Finally, with the mechanics, we will be talking about the complexity of the game mechanics. This is not getting my quarter star. I'm just going to tell you that right now, because only bosses take more than 2 hits to kill. The plant takes 3 hits to kill. Claw takes like 3 rounds of hitting him like 5 or 6 times with yellow eco to kill, and the final boss is like, I don't know, something like 20-25 hits or something like that to kill. But everything else in the game, like all the other monsters, you hit them once or you hit them twice and they die. And that is not very complex combat. That's not very complex gameplay, and so that is a negative. Also, everything in the game moves so slow. When you're on the zoomer and you get on the blue eco vents and you're running and you're flying really fast, like the noise picks up and it makes it seem like you're going fast, but if you really look at the screen, you're not going all that much faster. It just seems more complicated and more fast because the zoomer's crappy control scheme is just accentuated by like the 20% movement speed bonus that you get. Even when you have blue eco and you're running around, you're not necessarily getting anywhere that much faster. And when things attack you, and when the platforms are coming to you or going away from you, or you have to time these jumps, there's nothing in the game that's fast. The game is too slow, and because of how slow it is, it's not that takes away from the complexity. Also, enemies do not have complex attack patterns. They have like 1 or 2 ways that like they can attack you, and the third way they deal damage to you is just by running into you. So there's definitely no attack patterns to learn. You just need to wait for their first attack to be over, or hit them before they can attack to begin with, and that's it. And not to mention, since you only have to hit them once or twice, it's not that hard anyways. Also, the platforming presents minimal obstacles at any one time. There's no real point in the game where the game throws every single mechanic that it's forced you to learn at you. And so because of that, and because of the fact that most platforming in the game has you deal with like 1 to maybe 3 different kinds of platforming, to me, that's too simple and that's not complex enough. A key example of what I'm talking about is platforming in the final area. To me, it's underwhelming because they introduce new things like the tiles that drop when you hit them, like when you land on them. You land on a green one, all the green ones disappear, that kind of thing. It introduces that, and it has the platforms that start as a full circle and they go all the way down to single slices or single quarters of the full platform. But those are like the new, quote-unquote, new things it adds, but it doesn't stack the platforming things that you've learned on top of each other. Like when you're freeing the yellow sage, all you have to do is just go on launcher pads, but it's just too simple because that's the only mechanic in the entire puzzle to get to the yellow sage. You don't have to get on the zoom, or you don't have to get on the launcher pads onto something else to make really close and tight jumps, to get on a pole to jump onto something else to avoid a spike or a falling trapdoor or something like that. It's just one to 3 mechanics at a time, and it's just not complicated enough. So therefore, the game isn't complex enough for me to give it my quarter star in complexity. Alright, and that's it for the mechanics portion of this review. So, just like with the other three sections of this review, the mechanics have gotten a half star out of 1 star for me, which means that the total star count right now is 2 stars out of 4. Alright, so we're finally on to the final main category for this review, which is the investment category. And it's broken down into the replayability, dollar per hour, fun factor, and base game content subcategories. And the first of those categories is replayability. So this category is not getting my quarter star because it offers no new game plus. There's no defined alternate way to play, like there's no like different class setups or anything like that. There's no choice-based ending. There's no choice-based anything in the game. There's only 2 times that revisiting an area was necessary, and that was the yellow eco vents after you activated it to go back to the mountain pass to grab a power cell and to grab a couple of precursor orb crates in the spider cave. Sorry, I just blanked there. But besides that, there was no time where it was actually like required or like mandatory or requested of you to go back and revisit an area, which lowers replayability for me. And the game provided no incentive to start over. There was just no reason to play it again if you got the platinum, which I did. So after you get the platinum, there's no real reason to play again. Therefore, to me, there's not a whole lot of replayability. Therefore, it does not get my quarter star for replayability. The next investment subcategory is dollar per hour. So what I mean by that is basically, in order for me to personally find a game worth it, I need to feel that I got an hour's worth of entertainment per dollar I spent. So, for example, most games at full retail are $60, so I feel that I need at least 60 hours of content in order for me to feel like I got my money's worth. So for this game, I got the platinum in less than 10 hours. There's also no game-defined reason to play once I got the platinum. There's no post-game content. There's no reward for getting the platinum. And the main difficulty in the game was how bad at platforming I am. So this is tricky because if I was to spend the money on getting Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy on the PlayStation 2 when it first came out, I would say that this is not worth it. However, since I'm playing the PlayStation 4 port, and this came along with the PlayStation 4 port was the Jak bundle, which came with Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy, Jak 2, Jak 3, and Jak Combat Racing X, and altogether that was $40, and I got around 8 to 10 hours of playtime out of this. I am going to say that I got my dollar per hour desire. So because of the fact that I feel like I spent maybe $10 on this game, splitting the cost of the 4 games up by the amount of money I spent on it, I will give the dollar per hour subcategory my quarter star. Okay, so the next subcategory of investment is the fun factor. So I'm going to give the fun factor category my quarter star because there are lots of collectibles. There's 2,213 collectibles or something like that. There is a nice feeling of progression in the game because of how many collectibles there are. And I said, I platinumed the game in less than 10 hours. So like every 20-30 minutes you're moving on to a new area and you're collecting everything, and it just feels nice that it feels like, okay, I'm doing everything, I'm doing really well. I feel like accomplished as I'm going through the game because I'm just getting everything, and that feels nice. I never felt like I was going to have to grind in the game, and even though I play JRPGs all the time, and I do have to grind a lot, it's really nice playing a game where I feel like I don't have to grind, because even though I will grind if I have to, I would prefer not to, so that was nice. And I also never got game-breakingly lost. And what I mean by that is I never had to spend like 16 hours or something like that, like trying to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do. I never had to go online and feel like I was beating my head into a wall, just trying to figure out, like, the door over there needed some key from some irrelevant, whoever in the very first village of the game or something like that. I did get lost a lot. the best example that comes to mind was trying to find the yellow eco vent in Snowy Mountain, but I found that in like 10, 15, 20 minutes of searching, and to me that's not game breakingly lost. So I liked the fact that I didn't have to resort to a guide for this. Also, the game felt fair the whole way through. There are a lot of games where I feel like the game gets artificially difficult because enemies get more HP, or they deal more damage over time, or they just are allowed to ignore game mechanics. Like if you have a stamina bar, then they can just attack as much as they want, and they don't have a stamina bar. And I never felt that this game had any of that. The controls were snug, the rules were defined. It was very clear what the enemies could and couldn't do, and what the area was and was not going to do to you. So when I fucked up, I felt that it was mostly on me. So I appreciated that. So because of all this, the game gets my quarter star for the subcategory of fun factor. Okay, so this subcategory right here is probably going to be like the most controversial one, especially when I get to games later that actually have DLC. But for me, the final subcategory of investment is base game content. So I'm going to explain why I care so much about base game content and why I just basically dislike DLC. So when I buy a game, right, when I spend full retail or just any amount of money on a game, I expect a dollar per hour, entertainment value out of the game I'm playing. So when games offer DLC that provides what should have been in the base game, I dislike it a lot. Or when a game forces you to pay additional money for things, I just don't like it. When I pay however much money I pay, anywhere from like $10 to $60, I feel that I should be getting the entirety of the game when I purchase it. And so this game gets my quarter star for base game content because there are 2,213 items to collect, there are 16 areas to explore, there are endearing, charismatic characters full of personality and life. It is a beautiful world to explore, and the controls are mostly snug, not broken at all, and the gameplay is pretty much fair outside of the zoomer. And so that's the kind of thing that I look for in a game. It's complete. I feel that there's no real need to provide DLC for this game. Like if it was to come out today, there'd be no need for DLC because it's its own complete comprehensive package. And because of that, the base game content subcategory gets my quarter star. Alright, so now since I've gone over my feelings for the investment category, it gets 3 quarter stars out of 1. And so if you add that together, then we are at 2 3/4 stars out of 5. I feel kind of weird about this because my nostalgia makes me like the game a whole lot better. But as I was going through and as I was thinking about it, I'm on the fence about a few of them, honestly. I'm going to say it's anywhere between 2 3/4 to like 3.5 stars. But I can't give it more than that because there's just a lot of things I don't like about the game, and there's also a lot of things I do like about the game. So, but following the rules I established, I'm going to stick with my official star rating of 2.75 out of 5 stars. So, this is going to be like one of those games where I give it kind of a low rating, but I would recommend it highly to anyone who wants to play it if they want good half a day's worth of fun. So yeah, like I said, 2.75 stars out of 5. And yeah, that basically wraps it up for this review. And within the next coming days to week or so, I should be bringing you guys the Jak 2 Platinum walkthrough. So until then, thanks for watching. Oh, and also, I completely forgot to say, I really want to hear what you guys have to say about this, because as I was playing this game, and the entire trilogy really, I ran into a bunch of people who really liked the game and they had a lot to say about it, and we had really awesome conversations and discussions. And so I want to continue with that, and I want to have these kind of conversations with you guys. So whether or not you agreed or disagreed with me, I really wanted to hear back from you guys. So please, I implore you, leave anything that you think or feel about what I said in the comments, and I will get back to you guys. So yeah, like I said, I just want to have this conversation with you guys, and follow me on Twitch. I platinum a lot of games over there, so if you listen to this and you hate it and like you hate me, then go to my Twitch, find me when I'm playing, and just yell at me on there, and that way we can have, you know, a conversation like as close to in person as we can get. So anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks you guys, thanks a ton for watching this. I love this game, I love this trilogy, and I'll be bringing you guys Jak 2 soon. Peace.